Shalom lekulam. Today we are going to discuss some highlights of Pirkie Avot, in English, the Ethics of the Fathers. I hope that the material that we will bring will be different from what you're used to hearing on your Shabbat afternoon shiurim in Pirkie Avot. As you know, the Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkie Avot, is the line of tradition. And the line of tradition begins, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai u'mesara liYehoshua, and we go straight down the line. First, what's this misara? And gave it over. Misara, as far as I'm concerned, comes from the word masoret. Masoret is tradition. And as you all know from Zero Mastel, tradition, 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 da-da-da-da-da-da. And that's what we're going to be discussing, tradition. Now, the tradition begins at Sinai. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moses received the Torah from Sinai and gave it over to Yehoshua. And, as you know, Yehoshua gave the Torah over to the Shoftim, the judges to the Nevi'im, the prophets to Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, and we will not go into what is the Great Assembly, who were the men of the Great Assembly. However, we know that they were a group of people in the beginning of the Second Temple who were involved again with tradition. Now, after Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, it says in Pirkei Avot, Shimon HaTzadik haya mishiarei Knesset Hagdolah. Shimon HaTzadik was one of the last members of the Knesset Hagdolah, of the Great Assembly. Now the question, of course, is who is Shimon HaTzadik? Maybe Shimon HaTzadik is Shimon HaChashmonai. Many of you who have learned Jewish history remember that Shimon HaChashmonai, as far as the Maccabim is concerned, we can call him the last of the Mohicans. He was the most important. That would put him in the time of the Maccabim. On the other hand, maybe Shimon HaTzadik is the Shimon who, according to tradition, met Alexander. And Alexander became very, very close to him, because Alexander said, every time I went to war, before I began the war, I saw the image of Shimon HaTzadik. But it really makes no difference as far as we're concerned which Shimon HaTzadik we're talking about. But it's a Shimon who was a tzaddik. Of that we're sure. After Shimon HaTzadik, we come to a guy named Antignos Ish Socho. Antignos already is a little bit of a Greek name. Socho, we're not going to go in. Socho, maybe it's Soho. I hope not. But Antignos Ish Socho received from Shimon HaTzadik. And now we first get to a problem. And the problem is as follows. That Antignos Ish Socho, according to tradition, had two students named Tzadok uBaitus. Tzadok uBaitus are the Tzdukim and the Baitusim. What's our problem with the Tzdukim and the Baitusim? The problem is as follows. Antignos ish Socho said, Al tihiyu ka'avadim hameshamshim et harav al menat lekabel pras. Don't be as servants who serve their master with the thought of receiving for it a prize, a present, but rather do things lishma, l'shem shamayim, without thinking of a pras, of a prize. Now, according to Avot Rabbi Natan, which is a later Gaonic interpretation of Pirkie Avot, we find the following story. Antignos ish Tzadok had 2 students, and when they heard that he said, don't be like a slave, a servant, who is serving his master to receive a prize, they said, don't be like a servant who is serving his master to receive a prize, because there is no prize. And they began the movement of the Tzdukim, who, as you probably know, and we won't go much into that in this particular course, as you probably know, we call them Tzdukim. Later on, we may even say that they became the Karaim. Every kind of person that we didn't want to be part of traditional Judaism was by one scholar or another named after the Tzdukim. Now, when we finish with that, which means we now have the Tzdukim mixed in to our list of the traditional rabbis, we then have the story of the Zugot. Zugot are the pairs of scholars, which I'll come back to in a moment. But before we do that, I simply thought that maybe I should mention to you that with each of the scholars, they would say, the Mishnah would say, Hu haya omer. He would say. What do you mean he would say? He said. I interpreted, he would say he was not only a scholar, but he was a scholar who did what he said. You had many scholars who talked, who said, but they didn't do what they said. But these scholars did what they said. Anyhow, meaning, if I put it in Hebrew, Hu haya omer, Hu haya masha amar. That's what he was. And then we have a list of the Zugot, meaning who came after Antignos ish Socho. I think that I will read you the list of the rabbis of the Zugot, and I find that in Masechet Chagiga. And their names are Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan. That's the first Zug. You don't have to remember this because I'm going to go over this 5 times. Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan is Zug, or the first pair. Yoshua ben Prachia, and Nitai ha'Arbeli are the second pair. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach are the third pair. Then we have the fourth, Shmaya and Avtalion, the fourth pair. And then the Mishnah tells us something very interesting. Hillel and Menachem never argued. Meaning this fifth pair was Hillel and a guy named Menachem. But Yatsa Menachem Nichnas Shammai. We're told that Menachem left. What did he leave to? Some say Avodat HaMelech, he went to work for the king. Some say Shelo Neda Mitzarot. What do we say? We talk about Chozrim B'Tshuva and Chozrim B'She'elah. Anyhow, he became a Chozer B'She'elah. And he also left. When he left, Nichnat Shammai. Then Shammai came in his place. So the fifth Zug, the fifth pair, which was Hillel and Menachem, became Hillel and Shammai. After Shammai, we don't have Zugot anymore. Which already, I'm hinting to you and telling you, we don't have Zugot anymore because we accepted the traditions of Hillel. And we didn't need any more Zugot. We didn't need any partners. But as I said, I told you that you're going to remember the names because I'm going to repeat them 1,000,000 times. I'm now repeating them again. And I have a reason. Because in Masechet Chagiga, the party, chapter 2, it says as follows. Yossi ben Yoezer, remember, number 1 of the first Zug, Omer Shelo Lismoch. Don't somech. I'm not going to tell you what somech is because I want to go through it a third time, so you have to wait. But I'll just read it. Yossi ben Yoezer Omer Shelo Lismoch. Yossi ben Yochanan Omer Lismoch. Next Zug. Yoshua ben Prachia Omer Shelo Lismoch. Nitai Ha'arbeli Omer Lismoch. Now I know you want to know what it is, but you're going to have to be patient. Yehuda ben Tabai Omer Shelo Lismoch. Shimon ben Shetach Omer Lismoch. Shmaya Omer Lismoch. Ha 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 ha. The opposite. Shmaya Omer Lismoch. Avtalion Omer Shelo Lismoch. Hillel and Menachem never argued. Yatsa Menachem Nichnas Shammai. Shammai Omer Shelo Lismoch. Hillel Omer Lismoch. So now that we've said this, and I still haven't told you what's Lismoch and Lo Lismoch, and you're beginning to be impatient, I will continue and say that the Mishnah says Harishonim, the first member of the team, of each Zug, of each pair, Hayu Nisiim, was called the Nasi, the president, and the second one was called the Av Bet Din. Now we can start. But really start. What we just saw was that after Antignos Istocho, we have Zugot, pairs. And we see that the pairs are divided where one, the first one of the pair is called the Nasi, the president, let's say of the Sanhedrin, and the second one is called the Av Bet Din of the Sanhedrin. Now if you have a number of these pairs in the Sanhedrin, we're talking about a party which we can say is a two-party system in the Sanhedrin. Now let's go through this again, but let's do it in an easier way because I know you're getting upset with me, so please don't be upset. Just listen to my novel way of doing it. I'm taking 5 Zugot, and I'm saying that the first one is the Nasi, the second one is the Av Bet Din. So now I will say as follows. We are going to 5 Zugot, and therefore, and remember, in the 4th Zug there was a change, right? Meaning, here we go. Bim bam, bim bam, bim bam. Bam bim, bam bim. That's your 5 Zugot. The first 3, bim was the Nasi and bam was the Av Bet Din. In the last 2, something happened, and those who had been Av Bedin are now the Nasi. And those who were the Nasi are now Av Bedin. Meaning, what do we call this? What did we call this when Menachem Begin became Prime Minister of Israel? We called it a Mahapach. There was a Mahapach. So now we know that there was a Mahapach. We have a lot of things we're going to want to know. We're going to want to know why there was a Mahapach. But before we want to know why there was a Mahapach, it's time that we try to find out what, the heck is Lismoch and Lo Lismoch. What does it mean? There is a tradition that Rashi brings and that we find in most of the sources. This is not the tradition that I'm going to bring, which means my tradition is not right. But my tradition is more interesting. But not right. I'm sure I'm going to argue with Rashi. That's all I need. Anyhow, because the tradition is as follows. We're talking about placing your hand on the head of the sacrifice, of the korban. And we're talking about what kind of a korban? A korban chagiga that you bring on Yom Tov. Placing your hand on the head of the korban, lo lismoch and smicha means putting pressure. Meaning you're not going like this, but you're going, ah. That's what it is. And according to tradition, when you placed your hand on the head of the korban, right? And we're talking about Yom Tov, so there is an argument whether you should or whether you shouldn't. Let's use the word muktzah, okay? Even though muktzah doesn't fit here, but let's call it muktzah, or that's what it means. And here I'll quote to you from the Bartanura. Yossi ben Yoezer omer shelo lismoch biyom tov. On Yom Tov you shouldn't somech. Mipnei, he says, shemishtamesh beba'alei chayim, because you're using an animal. Why? Shebachol kocho hu somech. Because when you press your hand, you press quite strongly. It makes no difference if you and I don't really understand what this means, but this is the tradition. Tradition! Okay. Anyhow, I have a question though. If the idea is placing your hand strongly on the head of the animal or not, for 4 generations, for 5 generations, the Sanhedrin is going to argue whether you put your hand on the head of an animal or not? Does that make sense? If we're talking about 2 parties, we're talking about Nasi and Av Bedin. And the Nasi is the president, and the Av Bedin is the Av Bedin because he's second in command in the Sanhedrin. Wouldn't it make more sense if we were talking something in 5 generations, conservatives and Democrats? Meaning something that makes sense to argue about for 5 generations. You have to argue for 5 generations about who's the head of the Sanhedrin and who's not. That's somchin and lo somchin. I don't know. Oh, but it reminds me of certain things that I should really be embarrassed. You know, the word lismoch. We also say that lismoch means smicha. You know. So could lismoch be you put your hand on the head of the rabbi, smicha, animals in your name. And I'll give you one worse. You know, I only tell you the truth. That there are places where lismoch has nothing to do with what we've been reading. And let's say it says lismoch v'samach yado. It says somewhere in Vayikra, because everything there is in Vayikra. V'samach yado al rosh ha'sa'ir. Right? I was in shul once when they were reading the Kriyat HaTorah, and the Baal Koreh made a mistake. And instead of saying V'samach yado al rosh ha'sa'ir, he said V'samach yado al rosh ha'ir. Wow. Anyhow, true story, it happened. But let's get back to our problem. Our problem is somchin or lo somchin. How could it be an issue that divided the Sanhedrin for 5 generations? Which leads me now to, again, a non-traditional approach, but which sounds to me very interesting, and then you'll say, put up or shut up, and I'll try to put up. What if I say that the word somech has nothing to do with hands on animals, but the word somech means, as I very often will say to a friend of mine, Ani somech alecha. I count on you. What if we will say as follows? For 5 generations, the rabbis were arguing whether you have a right to take a tradition that doesn't make sense and give your own interpretation. Whether you say, X said this, and although it makes no sense, I can't change it. Ani lo somech, whatever it says, it says. If it says something ridiculous, I accept the ridiculous. And the other opinion would be, if something seems to be ridiculous, I can't accept it. Meaning I have to be more liberal. I can give a liberal interpretation. Now let's get one thing straight. All these people are chachamim. We don't have any tzdukim here. We don't have any of those. But they still are arguing whether we have to accept a certain tradition that doesn't seem to make sense or not. If I can find examples of both, then maybe we can really continue with this whole thing and understand it. Let's go back to the first zug, okay? Yossi ben Yoezer, number 1, says lo lismoch. What does lo lismoch mean? Not to count or make a kvetch with your fingers and a change, but to say even if it makes absolutely no sense, you have to accept it. Okay. Now I have to find examples. If you remember, the third zug, I'm using them